Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's time once again for Catalog and Cocktails. Oh my God, it's season 8. It finally is here. We took a million months off for summer vacation. Just kidding. But hey, it's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in our hands. I'm Tim Gasper, customer guy, product guy at Data.World, joined with Juan Cicada. Hey, Juan.
Hey, Tim, how are you doing? I'm Juan Cicada, principal scientist here at Data.World. And as always, we are back. It is a pleasure to come back live, middle of the week, towards the end of your day, to just have a break and go chat about data. This is start of year 5. I am super excited we're back. Just a quick parenthesis, go to data.world/podcast, and you can actually find now a way how you can chat with all of our guests. We have all the transcripts there. You can do that. So all the chat with your data stuff, you can now chat with all our podcasts. And with that, let's kick it off. I am really, really excited about our kickoff guest today, because our guest is somebody who I've been following on LinkedIn for a while. And she is somebody who is just truly honest, no BS, sharing those raw learnings of what she's doing in the data product world and using AI, GPT, all that stuff. And I just feels so refreshing to have like that genuine content of just somebody just completely open. And that's Anna Bergevin, who's a senior product manager at ResMed. Anna, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm here having a drink, talking about data. It's good.
Welcome to the show. So glad to have you. And thanks for kicking off this season with us.
Happy to be here.
So let's kick it off our Tell and Toast. What are we drinking? What are we toasting for?
Oh, I am drinking all day rosé Waterloo sparkling water, and I am toasting back to school because my children are back in school. And it's like the summer is always fun, but it is always logistically chaotic as a working parent. So yay to teachers, and glad to be back in school.
Cheers to that for sure. I think I feel the sentiment. I have 2 smaller kids. They're not yet going to school, but they're daycare. But I can, yeah.
Yeah, you have back to school to look forward to. I'll cheers to back to school also. My kids are just getting back to school. First day was just yesterday, which was tons of fun. And actually for my cocktail, I'm actually going with a mocktail today. So my wife got me these Curious Elixirs mocktails, which they can come in the mail. They come in like a fancy box. This one is Elixir number 7, which is the Curious Champagne Cocktail. It's got elderflower, Chardonnay flavor, jasmine green tea, lemon peel, and lavender. And you know what? I've tried a few of these Curious Elixirs. They taste pretty good. They don't pay me. This is not sponsored. It's just tasty. So if you want a mocktail, it's pretty solid.
That's awesome.
And I walked into my bar today. I'm like, gotta try something new, something I haven't had. And by pure coincidence, I also saw a bottle of Saint Germain, which is elderflower, which Tim is having. We did not coordinate here, but I'm just keeping it kind of to my core. And it's an elderflower old fashioned.
There's a part of Juan's in my brain that are connected somehow. We don't know. Today it was elderflower. Cheers, Anna. Good to have you.
Going back to school. So. All right, so we have our warm-up question. So what is the most interesting thing you've done with ChatGPT?
Oh, well, I am a big gardener, and I live in Utah. It's very snowy in the winter, and I very much get seasonal affective disorder. So I have my happy lamp, and I start gardening as soon as possible, meaning I have a rack with 5 levels, all these grow lights, and I grow 1 million seeds. But it's very complicated to figure out when you're going to plant them outside and then back up to how early you need to start them. So I went to ChatGPT. I gave it a list of all the seeds I wanted to start and when my last frost date was, and it made me a little plan. It was amazing.
That's awesome. I love that. Great use case.
How about you, Tim?
How about this? I'll give you one personal one and one professional one. So my personal one is my kids love AI generated stories. And so I've started to get more sophisticated with my ChatGPT generation because the stories were getting a little too formulaic. So I needed to kind of feed in some, I need to tell it make the story weird. And things like that. So that way, I tell it break up the structure of usual story structure and stuff like that. It actually does it. It makes it more creative. So anyway, that's my. I could talk to you all day about using ChatGPT to make kid stories. Work thing. I was spending a bunch of time this week trying to explain the difference between a sales play and a joint solution. Yeah, For those of you who know what that is, you know what I'm talking about. For those that you don't, you're like, what are you talking about? Well, it was kind of hard to define those things. And after like struggling with it for about 2 hours, I was like, you know what? This is something that ChatGPT is probably really good at. And it was. It had beautiful definitions for those things. So, great use case for using ChatGPT for work.
Awesome.
I do so on the story side, my wife is kind of for fun been writing some stories about chickens, get pets that we have, a little bit of a dark humor stuff, but then we were like trying to go make creative or versions of it with ChatGPT too. So that was an interesting one. Actually, part of the thing we want to go do now is like maybe we can have the ChatGPT version of a book, all the content and the images versus the one that a human's done, and then actually sell it. And then our metric here, what is better is what makes more sales. I don't know, but that was it. But anyways, we're going to dive into more ChatGPT stuff on using it, but let's kick it off. Honest, no BS. How the heck did you get into data product management?
Oh, accidentally, as many product managers do. So I was an analyst for a really long time. I was kind of at the top of the analyst career ladder. I had some product manager friends trying to decide, should I become a data scientist, an analytics engineer? Like, do I become more technical, or do I go the people leader route for analytics? Or should I just like jump career ladders completely over into product? And I just thought product was really interesting. I got asked to help out with one of our overseas engineering teams temporarily that after a reorg was left without a PM. And I loved the stand-up. I loved working with the team. I loved tackling things as a group. And the thing we were working on was very data heavy, which is part of why I was asked to help on it. And so I switched to product management. My first product was not data centric. It was the comms platforms. We were doing email, in-app notification, and mobile push notification. There's some experimentation, A/B testing, metric kind of stuff around there, but data wasn't like core to the product. And I was really missing data. And so a friend recruited me to come be a growth analyst. So I went to not growth analyst, growth PM, which is very data centric. I went there. Then after a layoff, I kind of had to look for a job for the first time ever in my life, like in that way of like, hey, everyone, I'm job hunting. And a former friend who was a head of data said, hey, I need help on the data platform. I need you to bring product and meld it with data. And I landed and had no idea what that meant to bring those two things together. And I spent the last 2 years figuring it out. So that's my story.
Yeah. Do you have it all figured out?
No, I figure it out actively every day.
People don't have this figured out, or do you think so anybody who says they know what they're doing, it's BS?
Yeah, no, there are people who are further along than me. I think that no one's there's no great books written on this. There's no extensive learnings. There's lots of people scattershot sharing things, but if you're like every product podcast you go to is talking about customer facing product, and you may build a data product that is customer facing. It's hard even to find content on platforms, let alone building a data platform. So I've just been piecing it together, and that's why I started posting and writing more, was to connect with all the other data PMs who every time I get on a coffee chat with another data PM, they're like, yeah, me too. I have no clue what we're doing. What are we doing?
Well, so one thing I want to get into this on this side is from the timing perspective. And the reason why I wanted to kick off with this question is because it's something that I kind of, we've been hearing from folks kind of asking, getting into this product management, this seems like such a cool role, but it's new. And then now you're starting to these people pop up around that stuff. And I really want to kind of have that honest discussion about how you said you've been doing it for 2 years. How long have people actually been thinking about this stuff? And what are the things that you would consider? There is no book yet, but if there was a book right now, if you could outline, what are the things that are already kind of figured out now, and what are the ones that I talk to people and they see it this way, and the other people see it this other way. Curious to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think that there's always been, chief data officers, data engineering leaders, people who had a broader vision for what it meant to get value out of data or to extract value from data. But what's happened at a lot of businesses historically, right, is they struggle to operationalize that. You have PMs who are like, oh, we want to build an analytics or a data product, but don't have a data background, and they struggle to piece that together. Or we have the data vision that these engineering leaders have, but then they end up just getting all these requests from the business, and it's hard to work on the strategic work because you're just being reactive and acting more like a service desk. So I think that what we are learning, like those of us who are trying to figure out this space and what it means to be product principles, is like, we don't just build whatever we're asked to build, right? This is strategic. It should go with the company strategy. We should be prioritizing according to what's needed. And some of that means building what's needed today, and some of that means building the platform that can deliver what we need a year or 5 years from now, right? So none of this happens overnight. So it's a mix of like knowing your customer. The best thing about being a platform PM or an internal PM is all your customers are easy to find for customer research. The bad part is they can all DM you every day asking where their stuff is. So it's just like managing that energy of like, what do you need? Tell me why this is hard for you. Like finding the friction or the pain points in just getting the data, getting it together, especially in my industry, which is very regulated, doing all this in a compliant way that protects privacy and protects the business's legal risks. So a product manager can do all that a little better because it's their whole job, right? Is to talk to the customers, to prioritize, to strategically connect things, to say no to things, to protect their engineering leaders' times. I think companies that don't have data product managers, we either have engineering managers who enjoy this and just who kind of are doing data product management, even if it's not their title, or you get engineering managers who are just frustrated that they're being pulled into too many meetings, they have too many asks, and it's not pleasant. So I think most companies should have data product managers, but they don't.
You get to be more stakeholder facing and really engage with where these data products need to go. So, I think that's interesting that you sort of started in data. You got into product management, and then obviously you kind of now are really focused on the combination of those two things. Yeah. Do you feel like as a data product manager, you're more product manager or more data person?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say I probably am more of a product person by process or approach. When I was an analyst, my bias was much more towards solutioning. What's possible, right? A question comes up. Oh, we have this data, or we could do this. Like it's very like that brainstorming or that creativity around what could happen. And as a product manager, I've had to learn to sit back and listen more and try to probe more to understand the problem before we jump to a solution. So my approach has differed, but I would say huge part of product management is having like empathy for your user. And of course, talking to your users helps develop that empathy. But also I was an analyst. So I was like, oh yeah, remember when we had data in 2 different warehouses and I had to bring it all in locally to my machine, and R was like, this is too much data and we can't store it. And it was a miserable nightmare. And then everything got on Snowflake and my life got easier. So I guess I keep my data person at my core, but like I act more like a product person now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, the more you have expertise and empathy in an area, as long as you be careful, the expertise can sometimes be tricky because sometimes you want to follow your own intuition instead of follow what you're learning and what you're discovering from your stakeholders, right? But like those things can help a lot. And obviously that data experience becomes invaluable. I like that you also brought up, and when you kind of explained getting into product management, data product management, there's a difference between customer-facing data products and internal data products. And I think that's super true. And it even feels like there are certain companies that, are more like they sell data or they have data products and services. And so they're more like customer-facing data companies versus, companies that are looking to manage data. And, of course, they need to sell better and market better and, be more efficient and things like that. But those data products ultimately are serving internal customers. And, can you talk a little bit about how you see those two things being different? And it sounds like you've mostly been focused on like internal data product management.
Mostly, yeah. There's been some early discovery that I can't probably get into detail about around stuff that might be customer facing, but I would say, I think, let's just say traditional SaaS product managers who want to bring a data product into the product or as an offering, right? There's a lot of value in data. Often your customers may pay extra for access to more raw data or exports or analytics, is that it is not as simple as let's just pull the data in and throw some pie charts and bar charts up. Like that's not what it's going to be. And so I think that often people get an idea around monetizing data and they have no idea how much tech debt and governance and things have to happen before we could do that. And so I think that it's just external data. You have to think about what's going to be valuable, what people are going to pay for, all of that aspect. But you also have to appreciate that, like, do you even understand the current state of your company's data? Is it even ready to do this? Because what's going to happen, you start doing a scatter plot and you have a bunch of outliers, it suddenly becomes much more obvious that there are data quality problems, right? And so, yeah, I think you think about it differently. I would say I am thinking there's overlap in that both myself and an external facing product manager are thinking about the end user state or the experience of consuming this data. What are they going to do with this data? What format does it need to be in? What questions does this data model need to answer? Or what shape does it need to be in so the BI layer or the application can consume this? What legal reviews, all these risks that have to be managed. But the difference is internally, I'm also managing a platform which has capabilities around how we're going to handle GDPR requests, how we're going to do other things. And a product tends to be just the interface and the data itself. So they overlap, but at the end of the day, there's different amounts of time spent on different aspects is probably the way I would think about it.
So one of the things that we were talking before is like that this work that has to do all this management work, you don't necessarily argue that there has to be a data product manager per se. Like that work is happening already, or it should be happening. And so I want to dive into like, what is that type of work and who is doing that work today? And when do organizations realize like, oh, it's time to actually go hire somebody specifically for this? Or maybe you don't ever have to. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, you may have data engineers who love to sit with customers and be in more of like a consultant type role of like really understanding the problem and what do you need and what can we build. But that may not be the best use of your engineer's time, nor would they enjoy the most. They might enjoy receiving more fully formed requirements and just doing the final design and then the tweaking and handling of edge cases. Like they're going to engage with the users or the customers either way. But my role, a lot of my time is sitting in a meeting, trying to understand the business context, trying to understand the assumptions that the user has, trying to help the user understand what they actually want. I don't ever build exactly what they ask for when they come. They come in and they're like, I need this thing. I'm like, oh, but do you need a dashboard, or do you just need an Excel that connects and you can do pivot tables off? Like, why are we building a dashboard when all you're going to do is build a table in Tableau and click CSV download? Like, why? So a lot of it is me pushing them to be like, don't tell me exactly what you need. Tell me what business problem you're trying to solve, what skill set you have, who's engaging, what's the workflow. So anyone could do that. A business analyst could do all that context gathering and bring it to the data engineers. The difference is, if it's my job to own it end to end, and my job is to make sure we are utilizing the data engineers' time for the right things, my engineers don't have to worry as much about probing business leaders about company strategy or telling them, well, I can do one of these 2 big projects. Which one do you care about? It's just about resourcing. So who you currently have on staff. Currently, there's only 2 product managers on ResMed's global data platform. And I'm spread very thin. So is my partner, Roger. And we have a group that really wants to move fast. And they said, oh, how can we partner? What do you want? And I'm like, you can go interview all these business leaders and figure out exactly what they actually want and bring me more drafted requirements that I just go validate, right? That's how you speed things up, not by building in parallel to the data platform. It's that we split up this job of discovery. So discovery has to happen. Prioritization has to happen. If it's a product manager, it's my whole job. So the question is, does your business have 5 different people, each doing 5% of their job on this, and a bunch of it doesn't ever happen? That's commonly what I see when there's no PM, right? Everyone's doing a little bit of this, but it's no one's job to own it wholly, and some of it just never gets done.
Interesting. So it sounds like, this work has to get done, and, a data product manager creates a more efficient and a more focused person who's helping to really figure out what are the right things to build that are going to solve the pains, that are going to provide the most value, that are the most prioritized. and also that is the actual experience that is what somebody wants, right? And when you were going through that, I always think about the old adages about like, a customer asked for a faster horse and what they really wanted was a car, right? Or the other flip side of that is customer asked for a unicorn and what they really wanted was a car, right? So,
Yeah, and just like what's realistic with where the business is at. So like
mhm.
any business, I mean, you can talk to lots of data people across the business. Will be like, why can't we get finance to stop storing everything in spreadsheets, right? Like the spreadsheets are stressing everyone out, and so a lot of people are just like, let's get them off the spreadsheet. And I'm like, but the spreadsheet is like really useful to them. Like there's a reason they're using that spreadsheet. So I did a whole round of interviews last quarter, I think, where I talked to all these spreadsheet users. I'm like, tell me what you're doing with the spreadsheet. And some of it, is just reporting. Some of it is like basically data pipelining, like insane things in spreadsheets. And I'm like, so what if we, what piece can we build, right? Could we build data cubes that you connect to from Excel? You can connect to like Power BI data cubes, for example, and run pivots in a report. So when you need next month to get that report, you don't go back and do a CSV download in this whole experience, start with raw data and reproduce this report. You just change your filter on your, right? So the question is, that user loves spreadsheets. So I'm going to help them do spreadsheets better rather than just deciding I have a vision that they should never use spreadsheets. It's like being realistic with what users want, what they need, and how do we stepwise move forward rather than what am I going to do? Send everyone who's in an analysty type role and be like, you all need to learn Python. You all need to be writing scripts. You all can only use the BI tool I chose for you. Like, that's going to be hard to do, expensive, slow, all those things. So it's also just, I don't know, being realistic with the evolution, having a vision for where we're headed and not just being reactive.
Yeah, it's not just about taking orders. It's also about trying to build out a roadmap of where things need to go based on what you're hearing.
Yeah, like people don't know how things could be better, right? Like,
right.
I didn't think I needed a digital whiteboard. I kept hearing about these digital whiteboards. And I'm like, I don't think I need a digital whiteboard. Like I got paper, I'm fine. And even when we're all using these a little bit during the pandemic, and then I started using Miro, I'm like, oh, this is so awesome. Miro like makes my life so much better. Like, right. So people also don't know kind of how things could be. And you kind of have to demonstrate, what if you did things this way? And if they don't want to move to it, you figure out why and maybe build something different, or maybe just they need more enablement.
Yeah, no, you're solving the pain and the problem, not just asking for the solution. Because if you just ask for the solution, nobody's going to come up with digital whiteboard. But when you're like, hey, I'm having trouble collaborating when we're not in person together, and but it needs to be real time, it needs to be all these things. Now all of a sudden, the product starts to make sense.
Yep.
It sounds like you're working with quite a few different personas as you're doing data product management, both from more of a consumer perspective as well as like the people that are helping you to build out those data products. I think about traditional software product management where you tend to have UX designers and you have, engineers, and usually there's like an engineering manager, and they're partnering up with the product manager to execute on that product.
Yeah.
What does that look like for data products? Is that similar or is it a little bit different?
It's a part of what is a little different, at least how we're currently staffed, is right. I don't have one single engineering manager partner.
Mm-hmm.
I have, there are two directors. One's working on more of the ingestion, one's working more on the analytics side of things. And then they have their engineering managers who report to them. And those managers work on slightly different tech stacks, slightly different systems they work with, et cetera, right? And my job is really, right, I'm working with the customer and they have to bring it together. So I'm not working just with a tightly coupled trio. I'm working with more like a small team of engineering managers who then go execute with their individual engineers. So that's a little different because we, like, as far as ceremonies and cadences and like how you practically work. Also, ResMed is very, very globally distributed. Like I have an engineering manager in KL in Malaysia. I have one in Sydney. We have people in India. We have people in Halifax. We have people in San Diego. So like just on a practical level, time zone wise, it's tricky. But I think that it's similar. When I was a traditional product manager, it's similar in that ideas come from everywhere. Ideas might come from your designer who's like, hey, I was fiddling around in Figma. I don't have a designer right now. That would be pretty cool if I got a designer, but we don't have designers allocated. But I still work a lot with my engineering partners who are like the ideas come up all over, right? My engineering director says, we need a semantic layer. I'm like, what do you mean by semantic layer? Because no one on the internet agrees what that means. And he's like, and he's like, well, I think we need this caching layer and this BI agnostic layer. And, you know, we're talking about it. And I'm like, okay. And he might send me some tech. And then we're talking about data contracts. We might send things back and forth. So it's organic, it's fluid, and the ideas come from anywhere. We brainstorm those things, we roadmap those things. I build requirements. They do the technical design. I guess what's a little different is just the scale, right? Usually when I was in B2B SaaS, even, right, we're building for like one individual user. On the platform, sometimes we're building for one individual user. Sometimes we're building complex systems and pipelines for like data quality monitoring or other things. It's just a little, it benefits the end user, but it's not all about an end user interface where someone's clicking and pointing, which is often B2B SaaS at the end of the day is about creating a digital experience. And I'm creating a lot of invisible experiences.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Maybe we do need like data designers. That sounds like a kind of a cool role. So it's something for us to explore as an industry.
We definitely need more design training for analysts building dashboards. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I mean, you go to Tableau conference, you watch those like Iron Viz guys and they build the most beautiful thing in like 30 minutes. And that is not the analyst most of us are working with. No shade on the analyst. I was not that analyst either when I was an analyst.
Most of the analysts watching that are like, that is beautiful. How did you do that?
I'm like, I will never be this good at Tableau. But I think, there's someone has to think about the end experience. And product isn't just about, I mean, design's not just about interfaces. It's also just about user experience, the mental model. And I would say if you don't have a designer, the product manager has to manage that usability risk through interviews and feedback anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like there's quite a few, even though the people are a little different, you don't necessarily have that trio of engineering, design, and product. There are a lot of similarities, from ideas can come from anywhere. You got to collaborate with your engineers. You got to collaborate with your key stakeholders. Do you feel like the process is similar or different? And just to tie in like a personal experience. So when I first came to Data.World, actually one of the first teams I managed was our data team. And one thing that I found that was difficult, so that was my first time directly managing a data team. I had usually done more like working more in a product capacity with software products. I found that was really hard to adhere to agile kind of deployment methods. Like it was a little hard to be like, oh, we're going to do a 2-week cadence and, we're going to launch things every 2 weeks because the work was pretty unpredictable. I don't know if you see something similar or have you kind of figured that out?
Oh man, we are always, I would say ResMed's a business that's been around for 35 years. So any business that's been around that long, there's going to be spots of the business where those teams are cutting edge and they're pushing to production like every couple of days and things are like and then there's these poor people who have this super old monolith code base and they're like, look, it's not our fault. We can't push to prod every couple of days. So it's very variable within ResMed and we're definitely trying to move in the direction of more agility. But at some point, when some of these data projects are so massive and so many elements have to come in together, part of what made us move fast in my first product team is every team had a distinct bounded context and it was very decoupled, right? So you had to publish data streams out for people to take a dependency on them. It was just like individual code bases. Data is like one interconnected web of code bases. And you can try to componentize and there's things you can try to do. But at the end of the day, the bigger scale the project is, the more coordination there is. So there's some aspect of it that's always a little bit waterfall, especially with things like migrations, and planning wise, we plan in quarters and I would say we try to leave agile bandwidth within there. We're always handling certain emergency ad hoc things are always coming into the data team, but I also just try to protect my team. And when requests come in, I'm like, I'm sorry, that sounds really interesting and important, but we're midstream. Like we can't just constantly shift our priorities. Some things just take 6 months. And we also don't ever just have one work stream. Every team always has multiple things going on. But you can't be perfectly agile. And it's unpredictable. You also just don't know how bad it is till you get in. That's how bad it is. That's very negative sounding. But if we all start from an assumption that the data will be clean and interoperable and everything's going to be great, and then you get in there and find every edge case, every weird historical bug, and it just takes longer.
Yeah, I think that's such a good comment, and that's okay. Hopefully, that's not too scary to the audience here. Like being somebody who's been in product for a very long time, it's like, of course, dragons are everywhere, and you run into them, you find them, right? Things are harder than you expect. Rarely does a project you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought it was going to take a week, but it only took me an hour, right? That's usually not how it goes. So, but this is just part of the process, and the more that your team kind of learns the situation that you have, you learn how to work together, you try to be agile, the better it gets.
Yeah, I think that's different about data is we don't control the inputs into our product, right? Like the inputs are coming from all over the business. We're usually a secondary use case, not the primary use case. And so we are making do. Now there's a lot of work going on to try to help connect those primary stakeholders to us to be like, hey, there's a machine learning model built off your data. You should probably be aware of that. And how do you get that context to persist over time and make things more stable? But I think that's part of what's different about data is you're working with components and pieces that you don't control end to end, right? You receive them and then have to make them work. And in software, at least the teams I've worked with, you're more building an experience, right? You're engaging with the user, you're capturing data, you're reflecting things back. There's at least in good software organizations, things are as decoupled as they can be. You just can't do that really in data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That comment is something that I think people don't realize when there's so many people talking about just data and stuff. So I think you always hear people like, oh, this is what they do at the big tech, at the FANGs and all that stuff. And it's like, they're doing all these things. I'm like, yeah. And those people control the product and the data all together. While you are working in an organization where you just get that data, you have zero say. I mean, you're getting data from Salesforce and from whatever it is, right? Someone's like, you cannot change that. And I think those are two different worlds, which one of my pet peeves is when like people make these statements out and they feel, and it's like, they make it in a way that is applicable in a generic manner. And then other people just eat it up and like, yeah, that's how we should go do it. It's like, but that doesn't apply to you. And by the way, you're not a Google, you're not a Netflix. Like you will never have those types of problems. So I think, I mean, anyways, I'm kind of ranting here again.
No, you're making a good point, Juan. Yeah, and I think Anna, what you're talking about, I think is it's the raw truth, especially of like enterprise organizations, right? Because like we've had a few folks on the show who sometimes have talked about either directly or indirectly data product management, but like they control all the inputs, right? It's like a software company where like they control all the instrumentation and they can manage all the data contracts all the way through the chain, and it's like, well, that's nice. That's nice that you could do that. But most companies don't have that level of control.
No. And if you want to work, sometimes I think I chose the hardest possible use case to start data product management in, which is healthcare in over 140 countries. It's cool. It's not complicated at all. But at the end of the day, that the problems that are most interesting to solve are most cross-functional, most complex, but I meet people every day who are like, oh, you work at ResMed? I have a CPAP. I love my CPAP. It changed my life. And I'm like, and they mean that because they were not sleeping. Like it is actually life-changing to start sleeping. And so, but yeah, you have to be realistic that if you're going to join one of these enterprise companies like in healthcare and you want to change the game of healthcare and make it more connected, more data-driven, all these cool things, and you want to bring that, what we see in digital SaaS and bring that to the enterprise, it's going to be painful. It's going to be slow. You're going to face a lot of problems, but it's really important. And that's really, for me, very satisfying. Not everyone belongs in the enterprise. My husband is a founder in a startup. He would lose his mind in corporate America. He hates meetings. He is just like founder all the way. But I think we don't hear enough, online from people who work at enterprise companies. And so it sounds like, oh, all the cool stuff's happening in Silicon Valley. I'm like, no, there's cool stuff happening everywhere. It's just, I don't know.
And I'm so glad you're saying this, and I want people to really realize this is also what I want to like on the podcast give the voice to folks like you who are like, you may not be working in the most shiniest kind of visible name that everybody else works with, but one, you're doing really impactful work that is impacting people all over the world, everybody's lives around that. And it's freaking hard. And you can actually, one can argue that it's harder than what these other companies make it saying, because it's just completely different perspective that you don't even listen, you don't even know about. And obviously the people coming from the big tech in Silicon Valley, like they're the ones who have a louder microphone and stuff. So honestly, like when I hear people coming in from the FANGs and like, well, this is how you do data engineering work, because and then I come like, yeah, I get it, but come on, you got your corner. There's another part of the world here too, which is probably bigger than you, and we also need that change, right? We need how to bridge that. I'm not saying it's not. Well, I'm not saying it's incorrect. I'm just like, obviously there are great things there, and they're the ones who are driving and pioneering. We just need to understand how to go translate that to the rest of the world. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you have, throughout this conversation, Tim and I are kind of back channeling here, is like, you've seen a lot. And what I'm really curious is to know what's missing right now in the data industry from a people, process, technology perspective. And the flip side, it's like, what do we have too much of? And can we just like, please calm down? That's it. Like, we don't need more of that.
Yeah. I will say the trickiest problem, and I'm not seeing like the trickiest problem we're working on right now, which is like, we know we need our data to go from less structured to more structured in order to power certain things where we're going with. Like people are like, oh, I think in 3 years, you won't need to know SQL because computers will write it for you. I'm like, how do computers know anything about these systems? It is not written down. Like, it's like, how do you teach a computer, like, oh, we have 3 different ERP systems, one in each of these regions, and this is what belongs in each of them. Like, so a real problem I'm facing right now is how to get that context out of the heads of people who've been working for 17 years in a role, and they don't even know what other people don't know, because to them it's all intuitive. How do I capture that? So if that's how I started playing with ChatGPT, was building these custom GPTs to try to help my SMEs like brainstorm their metric names and their business vocabulary, so we could start like documenting in more structured ways. And what I learned is like, I really need like a multi-agent system, like a team of taxonomical documentation experts who organically interface with a non-trained in these ways SME. That doesn't exist. I don't know anyone who's working on that. We all know we need to get to this target state. And like data.world, for example, which is our current catalog, right? I can have people go into a UI and document it, but like, it's very hard to get someone to be like, can you go document these 600 fields that you are a steward of? And they're like, yeah, eventually I'll get to that. And they never get to that. So like, is there a chat experience or a different interface or a way you could harvest through a corpus of all their documentation in their OneDrive and all these things and say, hey, these seem to be terms that matter. Help us make sense of them. That doesn't exist. There's lots of things that don't exist, but that is a current top of mind pain point for me.
No, thank you for being very open around this stuff, because I think it's the stuff that I'm personally I'm realizing right now, that the whole Gen AI and the LLM wave is getting the focus more on structure, on context, on knowledge, on semantics, which is well, I'm thrilled, because that's been my entire life, and I'm like, now people are paying attention to that. But I feel that we're like in this hype moment, and you're like, people are going to say, oh yeah, systems will write SQL for you, don't learn it. So then we're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to wait for it to happen. But then no, there's work that we need to go do. So, and if we don't do that work, then in like 1 or 2 years from now, we're waiting for this stuff. Oh, that LAI stuff that never worked, and the pendulum swings, right? So I think it's this moment where we have like folks like you who are really pushing for this, and this is why I'm really excited. And I mean, confirmation bias, I'll acknowledge that. I'm excited to meet people like you, who are like that's what I've been saying too. But yeah, I'm excited. Yes. Yeah.
So if we're wrong about this hypothesis, worst case scenario, I have a better documented data set for my analysts to refer to. Like what's the downside? I guess the opportunity cost of what people could work on instead of documenting that. But I can tell you, in a business as big as ResMed's, 10,000 employees and growing and globally distributed, we need. I mean, when I came, everything I would ask someone, they're like, oh, go hop on a call with Mary, go hop on a call with Bob. I'm like, I can't just like sit on calls back to back. There has to be async ways for me to answer questions or to get context. But if documentation isn't part of people's natural workflow, it's the task that always is going to go to the bottom of the list.
Yeah, so we just need to make documentation
intuitive, easier,
Yeah.
forced. Like we're talking about things like, do we have our software engineering teams push data dictionary as part of the schema registry, and they're not allowed to push changes without that, right? That might be controversial to the teams who don't want extra checks in the CI/CD workflow. But if we're like, would we rather you push it to us as a YAML file, or would you rather have to go into a UI and enter it all manually? And then questions of like, what's the source of truth? Probably the YAML file. Or is it the YAML file that then writes tags against Snowflake? Like, I don't know. So.
But that goes into the whole let's push left. And I think that's I mean,
yes.
Goes back to like, what are our incentives? I mean, at some point, like that is the context. If you like, we talk about data lineage and all these stuff, like you want like the knowledge lineage and like, where does that go back? It goes back to the person who actually wrote that piece of software and that team that come up with the requirements. Like, that's the ultimate source.
Yeah, who created that column in the first place? That person probably should share what the definition is of it.
Yeah, I was interested. We've been talking about Lineage a lot. People often talk about it in a like backward looking way. Like this asset I have, where did it come from? But something else we've been thinking about a lot recently is this thing I have, if I change it, who's going to be impacted? The downstream side of Lineage is something I'm thinking a lot more about. And it's really tricky, especially when things hit the BI layer, because the lineage breaks or it becomes a service leader. And then you have to say, oh, and then that asset, who's viewing it, who's consuming it. And so, yeah, that traceability of like, we need to replace this thing. Who are all the stakeholders who have to pivot? Like, how much can we stop the breaking change? And how much do I have to change manage people to change to the new asset? So, yeah, that's another problem of like change management over time and mitigating impacts. There's some innovation happening in the data contract space. I think it'll be interesting to see where that goes, the open standards, the private products. But what's clear is we need producers to be aware of secondary use cases of their data. They're just thinking about it in the application context, and we need that context to be there for them at the time they're planning a change and going to make a change, and that it's a contextual alert, not just this will break a dashboard. Well, is that Todd in supply chain's dashboard he built 3 years ago and it's still refreshing, but no one looks at it? Or is that the CEO's like mobile dashboard he checks every morning? Like those are different, because we can't necessarily stop all development because it might break something somewhere, but we probably need to stop it from breaking the most important things.
Yeah, no, that's a great thought process there. You know, I was just seeing a comment coming here from Raja, how to improve data quality in an organization. As you're thinking about like as a data producer or as a data product manager, you know, by the way, I think it's a sign of maturity of your organization that you're not just reacting. It's not just the people building reports who are looking back at like root cause analysis, right? You're being proactive and thinking about as producers and as curators and as data product managers, how you're affecting people downstream. How do you think about quality and governance in the context of the work that you do for data product management?
I mean, we talk about it all the time. There's quality for like, there's so many different layers of quality. There's just like, for example, one very strict is like when we bring in a source system to the warehouse, did we get the whole thing, right? Did we do a good job? Like, is this an actual good replica? That's one dimension of quality that of course we have services to manage and do things around that. Then there's like quality in the, is in the eye of the beholder. Like it might be fine when they set up the ERP that they let that be a free text field, but now it's not fine. Like someone's like, no, we need to govern it. For example, a data value came in, it was from a third-party data set, and it was for BMI, body mass index. And it was like a 4-digit value, which is not possible in BMI. And so someone's like, whoa, how is this happening? I'm like, I don't know, we can go investigate. But you can't put data quality tests on everything. You can't put alerts on everything. It's going to kill your compute costs, and no one's going to look at it. It's just like a waste of time. So I think quality is always in the context of like, okay, this data point kicks off an automation over here. So it has to be valid. Well, what does valid mean? Valid means it can only be one of these two values. It can only be within this range. It can never be null. So what does it mean to quality test that? Someone needs to get alerted if something's out of range so they can fix that upstream, so they can handle the edge case, so they can clean up historical data. There's also a difference between, we had some ungoverned history here and some messy data. Do we go rewrite history and clean it up as if it never happened? Or are we just stopping the bleeding from here on out? And then once we clean up a set, might do a static quality analysis and send that to the IT team that's over that Salesforce instance or that ERP and say, here's all the data quality problems we're seeing. You can go put validation in here. You can go make this field required. Like you can prevent some of these issues, and how much of it is just alerting. So I guess the question is, why do you care about quality? For what use case? What's the ideal outcome? Who needs to get alerted? Who needs to be aware? Who needs to remediate it? Who's going to be incentivized to remediate? I'm not going to put a bunch of quality tests in place and report on it, and then no one's incentivized to improve the quality because then we've just spent a bunch of money for no reason. So to me, it's figuring out that whole, when people say we have data quality problems, that's where product management comes in, and that muscle is saying, tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean? How are you experiencing that?
I am going to give you a huge round of applause for this. This is a very important segment for when people say we need to improve our data quality. I'm like, okay, let's open up that can of worms and then people should listen to this particular segment that you just said. That was super spot on and how you went through all these things. Because I think that's it. It's like people think about it as, oh, it's a one thing. We need to have high quality, whatever. Just give me a green or whatever numbers. I'm like, no, this is so much. And you very eloquently described it. So thank you so much. That was great. And I think this is a quote. Data quality. I like this part. Do we go back and rewrite history as if it never happened?
I mean, there's some point where it's like, let's say, for example, there are dates that I found a date field. We'll just say, this isn't sharing any inside baseball. I found a date field in one of our databases, and the date was 1910. And I was like, hey, ResMed didn't even exist that long ago. Like, this is not possible. What's going on? And of course, there was a whole story in Edge case. Then the question is, if my architecture is that my database should replicate source, that's what it says in the source, but it's not true. That's a data quality problem. But do I make the software engineers go fix it? But can they overwrite it? Do I impute it as null? There's a whole bunch of decisions to be made. And that depends on who's the user and why do they care.
I did the same thing like dates. I had a column called years. So it's a string. So because they only have years in there. Okay, so there's a string. So then you're doing an aggregate over that. And then suddenly you have some null values or you have strings, whatever. And then you're trying to get the average age of something. Well, then this is completely off, right? Or then there are some other numbers, which is like 1800 something. Well, that was just somebody who put in, that means I don't know, or whatever, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, qualities. But anyways, before we go into our lightning round, one more thing, because we started off with our warm-up question about Gen AI and GPT and everything. And there's a lot of stuff that you've been posting on. Just quickly, how are you using Chat GPT on these Gen AI tools to help you in your job, for your data product management job?
Yeah, I mean, I use it for everything. Like every day. I only started using it 6 months ago. ResMed had to do their due diligence and make, I used it a little bit before then, but I'd be very careful about every input that it was only public information. So it was very fragmented in how I could use it until they got it at an enterprise license. I use it for my productivity, for research. I still use Google. I think it's funny some people don't use Google. I'm like, it's like the intent behind the query matters, right? If I need to find out like what's the address of this restaurant, like I'm not gonna ask ChatGPT that. Like, but for example, we were looking at semantic layers, right? And I hear the word semantic layer. So many vendors love to say semantic layer. I don't know what any of them are talking about. So I tried to just be like, what is the semantic layer? And it was like, again, ChatGPT's answer was just as confusing as the real world. And I was like, you also don't know what anyone's talking about. But my engineer was like, hey, we should look at cube.dev, which is a version of a semantic layer that is, a way to model cubes on top of the warehouse, push them to the BI layer. And I was like, okay, but I don't really get it. Like, how does this, we're modeling data in DBT, so why are we also modeling it in cube? Like, I couldn't figure out how these two things came together. And yes, I could have just called my engineering partner and been like, please explain this to me, but he is busy also. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, are these tools like duplicative? I'm confused. And ChatGPT is like, actually, they're really complementary. And this is how people use Cube and this is how people use DBT. And I was like, oh my gosh, this all makes sense. So sometimes like research like that. But I build a lot of custom GPTs for repeat tasks. Like I have a PRD creator. I know there's some tool out there called Chat PRD, but when you work in an enterprise, you cannot just use every SaaS solution that's out there. Your InfoSec team would not love that. So I built my own that formats things in Markdown. I copy and paste it into Confluence and it's formatted the same every time, makes it very easy to read. I also the thing I posted about the most is like taxonomy experiments. I am not a taxonomist. I have a friend who worked on a taxonomy team in a prior role. I've been an analyst who had a bunch of tags that became the taxonomy later. So I was thinking a lot about controlled vocabulary, how you manage a data set, and all this Gen AI stuff came out. And I thought, if we want to be able to ask robots about the world, we have to teach it about what our lens of the world looks like. And we can't just, I don't care how, the US government conceives of the medical world. I care about how ResMed talks about the medical world. So I started doing things like throwing documents into ChatGPT and having it do entity extraction and give me lists. And just, I feel like the thing about experiments like this is sometimes they save me a bunch of time, sometimes they don't. But I always learn about what are the bounds or the limits of these LLMs out of the box without additional training. You're like, oh yeah, it was not good at that. Or you know what's really good at? Generating descriptions. If you give it vocabulary terms with a little context for what domain they're from, it actually generates very decent descriptions. If you try to get it to extract from free text or from metadata from a database, mixed results. And all of it at the end of the day still needs a human. It's basically just getting short draft lists to a human, but a human still has to make decisions about what goes at what level of taxonomy, how do we want to define relationships between nodes, like what are the standard terms we want to use, stuff like that. So I just keep playing around with it. I just keep throwing things in there and see what happens.
I love that. Humans need to be in the loop.
Yes.
And it's not a tool for everything. It can do a lot of amazing stuff,
Yes.
but like if you're trying to classify something, then maybe you should use a regex or something like that. I think that's one thing that everyone's starting to realize now is Gen AI is awesome. It does a lot of things that weren't really easy before, and there are some problems it's not the right tool for.
Yeah, like my first experiment, I tried to create a general taxonomy assistant that was like, oh, I can hand this to the SME and have them just chat with it and generate me a list of vocabulary. So we're not talking about hierarchy, we're just talking about vocabulary lists. It couldn't even do that. The user just had to behave in more predictable ways. And then what I realized is, no, you need like one agent who extracts like hand me a bunch of documents from your, or screenshots from your dashboards. It'll extract values. Then you have to say, sort these into categories that make sense. Then you have to decide if you like those categories. There are like all these different subtasks. But at the end of the day, let's say at ResMed, if we want to handle taxonomy centrally, we've worked with an official taxonomist. They're going to come in and bring a rigor to it that our SMEs, they tried to train our SMEs first to be like, this is what a dimension, like it was too complicated. The SMEs were like lost in a world if their brain doesn't work that way. So what the answer was, can I use these multiple agents together? Yeah, and it wasn't good out of the box. It could be good at subtasks, but then you need something that orchestrates those agents to show up in an organic way for the end user. Which is why only I am using these and I am not handing them to untrained SMEs and having them get frustrated with me, at least so far.
Wow, this is another topic we can go in. And again, my takeaway here is go follow Anna and go. You're always sharing good experience. All right, so start wrapping up. We got our lightning round questions, which I'm seeing them here for the first time. I'm going to go off. So number one, could all companies benefit from a data product manager?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, how about all companies over a certain employee?
Tim,
you anticipated the follow-up question, which was going to be, is it only at a certain scale?
Yeah, I think that you're going to need data engineers before you need a data PM, right? You're going to need a warehouse before you need a data PM. You're probably gonna need analysts before you need a data PM. But yeah, if you're gonna get your data headcount above a certain size, or if you want to build a product where data is the back end, right? So a customer facing product, you should probably get a data PM with data background rather than try to have a traditional PM. There's just so many risks. Someone without a data background won't know. And so if you try to be too scrappy with a PM who's great at go-to-market, great at messaging, great at building user interfaces, but they don't understand data, there's a lot of risk there. So those are the reasons you'd hire a data PM. Your data team gets to a certain size, or you need to build a data-facing product that people are going to pay for.
That makes sense, yeah. And it'd be hard to build a software product without an engineer as well, right?
Yes.
Next question. So are data product managers also the right folks to manage AI products?
Not necessarily. It just depends. I think all PMs, data PMs, and standard SaaS PMs all need to get familiar with the capabilities of AI, not just generative AI, but like you should understand fundamentally how data works. You need to be literate in these things so that you can engage efficiently with data science and your MLEs. But you don't necessarily have to be a data product manager to effectively use your data scientists. It helps. The more literate you are, the more background you have, the more efficiently you can work with that team. But I've seen people successfully utilize ML models in their product without having a data background.
All right, last question. Do you need to spend some time as a product manager to be a good data product manager? Or can you like read some books and kind of self-service around it?
That's such a good question. I think anybody, let me put it this way. If you're not going to become a product manager first, you really better have a good mentor. If you just try to figure it out just from books and podcasts and you don't have like, either you report into a director of product or you have an official mentor you meet with weekly for coffee chats. You're like, this is what I'm dealing with. Like when I first became a product manager, I had a mentor. We had a mentorship program through our business, and it was a much more senior product person. And I would sit down with her and she's like, well, what are you thinking for your roadmap? What are you doing? And I just started rambling at her at this coffee shop. And she's like, you need to center more on the customer. It's just that like muscle or that training of like, you're jumping to solutioning too quickly. You need to sit with the problem longer. Those muscles and habits. If you've already been a product manager, you can bring all that to data. If you're a data person and you just learn product, as we said, everything out there that's written, it's going to feel everything you read, everything you listen to on a podcast, you're going to think, but how does that apply in my weird enterprise platform world? It's all like SaaS customer facing. So could you, without a mentor and without a background? Yeah, but it's going to be really hard.
All right. That's fantastic. So Tim, takeaway time. Take us away with takeaways.
Let's do it. So many takeaways. Yeah. I'm going to do my best to hit the top ones. So, we started off, Anna, with how did you get into data product management? And you said that, you were sort of at the top of the data analyst career ladder and you were trying to figure out what to do next. And you got an opportunity to actually be a product management pinch hitter, which I think ties a little bit into our lightning round section, which is that, if you get an opportunity to do product management, that can be a really great accelerator. Of course, having a mentor or something like that can be great and valuable as well. You ended up actually having an opportunity to go into products. You were a product manager. You became a growth PM for a little while. And then you were actually looking for a job. And, somebody was looking for help with data product management, and you got to step into that. So, you were a data person, you were a product person, and then you got to merge those two things together as a data product person, which I think is a really interesting and cool journey. And then, we kind of talked about, do we have it all figured out? And you were like, no, we don't. But there's no book for this. There's good resources, but there's a lot of good content out there that you can find. I think, Anna, you put some really awesome content out there. So I think folks should follow Anna and see what you're putting out there. But I think folks are learning more about data product management, and that's important. But if there was a book, what would be in it? And you said like, hey, you don't just build what you're asked to build, right? You got to think thoughtfully about the problems that people are having and what's the right solution. You should be strategic. You should, obviously you have to, resolve certain needs that are urgent, but you really are trying to develop a platform that serves what's going to, be coming in a year, right? So you're thinking not just short term, but also long term as well. And you said that you kind of have to be slightly more product person than data person in terms of especially the process and approach. You need to listen. You got to make sure you're not just jumping to solutions. But of course, data experience is core, right? That's what allows you to have that empathy and that perspective and really understand. Internal versus external product management, those two things are different, right? Usually, internal product management, you're not as worried about monetization or, some of the ethical considerations and things like that versus with external product management, you would. We talked about, how many data PMs and kind of what the process is at ResMed. You said you have 2 data product managers, and you could have more. But as you think about who does data product management work, some people are already doing this. They might be a data engineer, they might be a business analyst, but you get to a point where you're like, hey, maybe we should be consolidating some of that work, right? And being able to get more scalable about it. So I thought that made a lot of sense. So many other things. But Juan, what about you? What were your big takeaways?
All right. So on the team aspect, which is interesting, I think it's important to understand kind of what circumstance where people are listening, right? Where they work at. Like in your case, you don't have a specific engineering manager to work with, like which is usually what people have in software, right? Engineering design. In ResMed, you are very distributed teams, right? You don't have a designer, but you work very close with your engineering counterparts. But hey, like design is really important. You think about the end experience. It's not just the UI, but it's the whole usability. Mm-hmm. On the process part, I think it's some aspects maybe waterfallish, because you have big migrations, but some others are going to be agile. I mean, it really depends on like how old your organization is and how mature they are. Some parts are going to move really fast, some parts are going to be really, really slow around that stuff. What are the trickiest problems that need to be solved right now, especially kind of in this era of AI? What you brought up was like we need more structure in the data. Like people are saying, we don't need any. We're not going to have to learn SQL anymore. But hold on, the computers need to learn what that stuff actually means, and it means it has to be written down somewhere. So we got to get it down. So there's like the issue is like, how do we get the context that's in people's head? And you're like imagining a multi-agent systems that you have like a team of taxonomical ontology experts who can work with the SMEs around that, right? So how do we make documentation easier, intuitive? Like what are the incentives around that? We're saying, hey, software engineering teams, they need to go push the data dictionaries. That can be a contentious kind of conversation there, but maybe those are the type of thing we need to start discussing. And that's kind of what's missing in the data world right now. Then we had this conversation about data quality, which is like, hey, everybody talks about it all the time, but like, for example, if we brought in entire source data, do we have a good replica like that? But maybe that good replica has some quality issues. But at that point, that was correct, right? Quality is in the eye of the beholder, right? It is fine at the moment that the ERP was set up to have some free text, but it isn't fine right now. Really, you got to ask about quality. Why do you care? What is the use cases? Who's going to remediate all of this stuff? And a t-shirt quote, data quality. Do we go back and rewrite history as if it never happened? Then for how to using Gen AI for your product management work, right? You started officially using it 6 months ago. A couple of things. You use it for research, for definitions, and compare how this vendor is talking about this thing. You built custom GPTs to create PRDs, so product requirement documents. You're using it for like taxonomies and control vocabularies to extract entities from documents. And have to acknowledge sometimes it works, it saves you time, sometimes it doesn't. But you need to experiment and try these things. It works great for generating descriptions. And don't forget, we need humans in the loop.
Yes.
All right. How did we do? Anything we missed?
I mean, not that I can think of. It sounded like a good summary. We talked about a lot of things.
Hey, this is you. So, All right. To wrap us up, 3 questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Oh, okay. What's my advice? My advice is to use writing to clarify your ideas before you start building anything. I said I use Gen AI to write PRDs, but like it's a very conversational. Like it's not just me going, imagine this solution and build a thing. And then I often have to edit what the PRD gets written. I think often when I go to write something out, that's when it clarifies for me. What's missing? What assumptions are people not talking about? Hey, this doesn't make sense. Even if that artifact is just for me, even if it never sees the light of day. And even with all the ways I use AI to shortcut things, I still end up writing and rewriting. Even if I use AI to assist me in getting a first draft, I always end up just cleaning it up. And that process is very thought-provoking. So I think everybody should do that. And especially anyone tackling a data project should draft that first. What are the assumptions? What do people actually want? And ask more questions. Try to get the core of the pain point and not just be reactive. The second one, who should you talk to? So there's another data PM you could talk to, Nick Zervoudis, I think is Greek. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But Nick and I connected online. We've talked. He really gets this data product stuff. We're of the same mind, but he's working in a very different business, very different context. And I'm going to recommend my friend Adrienne Baker, who is not very active on LinkedIn, but I could connect you to, who worked on taxonomy as a product at a business. And what it means to like have a controlled, governed data set, like a data product, what it means to version that over time, what it means to merge things and to have so many dependent use cases on a data set that you are actively managing and she's just a very thoughtful, interesting person. I hope she doesn't kill me for sending you her way. She's great. And what do I follow or listen to? Like I said, there's not a lot directly on data product that I encounter. I basically follow every data product person I can find on LinkedIn that I'm just like, tell me what you're doing, tell me what's happening. I also follow data engineering and information architecture people, and I think these are very different thought circles, and it's very helpful to see the ways that they are perceiving trends or things that are happening. So I think curate your little bubble online. I unfollow people if all they post is like memes and fluff that's like nonsense, like influencery type stuff. I'm unfollowing that. I don't have time for that. But I also try not just to follow people who are just like me, because I want to hear how are people handling things in a different way. I listen to a couple of podcasts. But they're producty. Lenny's podcast, Lenny Richitsky, and I listen to Melissa Perry's podcast, which is another product podcast. And I listen to a lot of like random data podcasts, often picking episodes that sound relevant or interesting to me, of a variety of them. And that's all I have time for, because I have 2 kids and a full-time job.
That's a lot of stuff. And by the way, Melissa Perry's podcast is great. I love that one.
It's really good. And it's a different flavor than Lenny. They just approach it differently. It's good.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, thank you so much. Just a quick reminder, next week we have Tian Kai Fen, who's the data strategy and governance lead at ThoughtWorks, and just recently has his book, Humanizing Data Strategy. And with that, Anna, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. As always, thanks to Data World that lets us do this now for year 5.